The Zephyrian delegation had arrived at the derelict human vessel with all the pomp and circumstance befitting their species' notorious arrogance. Commander Vex Thule, his crystalline carapace gleaming under the artificial lights of the boarding tunnel, strutted through the airlocks with the confidence of a predator entering an abandoned nest. "Behold," he announced to his subordinates, his voice carrying the melodic yet condescending tone that had made the Zephyrians the most despised. "Diplomatic species in 3 sectors, the mighty human war machine, reduced to floating scrap metal in the void." The ship they had boarded was indeed a sight to behold, if one appreciated archaeological curiosities. The UES Prometheus had been drifting in this system for nearly 2 centuries, according to their scans. Its hull bore the scars of countless battles, pockmarked with plasma burns and kinetic impacts. The humans called it a dreadnought, though to Vexathul it looked more like an oversized coffin. The Zephyrians had come here on a salvage mission, drawn by rumors of advanced human weapons technology. Their own recent defeats at the hands of the Terran colonial navy had left their military leaders hungry for any advantage they could scavenge from humanity's past. As they moved deeper into the ship, emergency lighting cast eerie shadows along the corridors. The artificial gravity still functioned, though at reduced capacity, making each step feel strangely buoyant. Vexthul's mandibles clicked with amusement at the primitive human architecture. Straight lines and sharp angles, so unlike the elegant curves of Zephyrian design. "Sir," called out Lieutenant Kexmar from ahead, "we've located what appears to be the bridge." They emerged into a vast chamber dominated by command stations and tactical displays, all dark and silent. But it wasn't the technology that caught their attention. It was the figure seated in the captain's chair. She sat perfectly upright, hands resting on the armrests, chin slightly raised as if surveying a fleet that no longer existed. Her uniform, though faded, still bore the insignia of a Terran fleet admiral. Time and the ship's failing life support had mummified her remains, leaving behind what looked like a statue carved from ancient leather. Vexthul approached the figure with theatrical slowness, his officers following at a respectful distance. He had heard stories of human tenacity, their refusal to surrender even in hopeless situations. Looking at this desiccated corpse, he found those tales laughably exaggerated. "So this is the famous human warrior spirit," he mused, circling the chair like a predator examining prey. "Look at her, officers. This withered mummy was once feared across the galaxy. Admiral Sarah Chen, if the ship's records are accurate. They say she held off the entire Zarathi armada at the Battle of Kepler's Edge." He reached out with one clawed appendage and traced the air just above her head, not quite touching. "The terror of 3 species, reduced to this pathetic husk. Where is your indomitable will now, human? Where is your refusal to yield?" His officers chittered their approval, though some seemed less comfortable with their commander's theatrical display. The ship felt wrong somehow, too quiet, too still, as if it were holding its breath. Vexthul, emboldened by his audience, leaned closer to the admiral's face. Her skin had drawn tight against her skull, leaving her features sharp and angular. Her eyes were closed, sunken deep in their sockets. "Look at this ancient relic," he announced louder. "The humans spoke of honor in death, of going down fighting, but here sits their great admiral, died of old age in her chair like a pet animal." He reached out to touch her face, to demonstrate the complete powerlessness of this long-dead warrior. His claw had barely made contact with her cheek when something extraordinary happened. Her eyes snapped open, not the clouded, lifeless orbs one might expect from a corpse, but sharp, alert, intensely human eyes that burned with intelligence and fury. Vexthul barely had time to register shock before her hand, that mummified, ancient hand, closed around his throat with the grip of a hydraulic press. The Zephyrian commander tried to scream, but her fingers crushed his vocal cords with surgical precision. His claws raked at her arm, finding flesh that felt more like hardened carbon fiber than aged skin. She didn't even flinch. 200 years, she said, her voice a whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the bridge. 200 years in hibernation, waiting for someone stupid enough to board my ship. Admiral Chen rose from her chair with fluid grace, still maintaining her death grip on Vexthul's throat. Her body, which had appeared mummified moments before, now revealed itself to be something far more sophisticated. The deep space hibernation protocols hadn't just preserved her, they had enhanced her. Bioengineered modifications, experimental, at the time of her supposed death, had finally reached full integration. "You want to know about human warrior spirit?" she continued, lifting the struggling Zephyrian commander off his feet with one arm. "We don't just refuse to surrender. We set traps that last centuries. We turn our deaths into weapons. We make our corpses into guardians." The other Zephyrians finally overcame their shock and reached for their weapons. But Admiral Chen was already moving. Her free hand activated controls that had seemed dead for centuries. The bridge erupted with light and sound as systems came online. Blast doors sealed the chamber. Defense grids activated throughout the ship. "The Prometheus was never derelict," she explained conversationally, even as she crushed Vexthul's windpipe. "It was a mousetrap, a honeypot for scavengers and grave robbers. I've been waiting so very patiently for someone to spring it." The ship's weapons systems, hidden beneath layers of false damage, began targeting the Zephyrian fleet that waited outside. Admiral Chen's lips curled into something that might have been a smile if it weren't so terrifying. "You mocked the sleeping warrior," she said, her voice carrying the weight of 2 centuries of patient planning. "But some of us never sleep. We just close our eyes and wait for the right moment to remind the galaxy why they fear us." Vexthul's struggles grew weaker as his vision darkened. The last thing he saw was Admiral Sarah Chen's ancient, terrible smile, and the tactical display showing his entire fleet being systematically destroyed by weapons that had been waiting centuries for this moment. The hunter had become the hunted, and humanity's reputation for impossible victories lived on in the grip of a woman who had turned death itself into a weapon.